And she's going to be talking about Fitbits and aging selves. Laura, over to you. Welcome.
Thanks. I was telling Amanda earlier, it's a real treat to just be away from the office at this busy time of year. You know, sitting on the train just felt like luxury this morning, even though I was grading. So you're the first folks to hear this piece of research, or it's the first time that I have actually, I'm just going to lock the screen. So you're the first folks to hear this research. It's so you know, it may not be as polished a talk as if it was going to be the fifth or sixth time through doing it. So at the 2017 Consumer Electronics Show, which is a big event that's held in Las Vegas every January, electronics giant Samsung surprised almost everybody, and particularly the business watchers, by changing their market development plans at the last minute. They had widely been expected to focus on robots as their forward-looking research plan, and instead they announced that they saw more potential in the wearable health sector. And the CEO said that an aging society was going to help that market segment grow more quickly. Now, of course, wearable devices include a whole range of things, but wearable digital fitness trackers are the heart of this large and growing market, so Fitbits, generically. In this paper, what I want to do is consider the ways that embodied aging might be shaped by some of these devices and how they get taken up by older adults in their everyday life. So what these devices do, you can see I'm wearing my autoethnographic device here. What they do is translate bodily movement into measurement, into quantifiable outputs. They produce data that you can use, you can display in different formats, and you can share with other people. And they're also very much, as I'm going to argue, bound up with discourses of risk management in older populations. And this is where my research differs from biomedical and exercise sciences, which are pretty much the only sector that has looked at self-tracking devices in relation to aging populations. And they're looking at behavior modification and how they can use them to enhance interventions. I want to argue that what we need to do is attend more carefully to how practices of self-tracking and the data that it produces circulate through networks of relationships, networks of expertise, networks of technologies. And we also need to look at the ways that this measurement gets embedded in everyday social worlds. So let's start with what those industry observers have been saying. Now, the industry observers seem to be actually kind of surprised that it's taken manufacturers so long to jump onto this bandwagon and see potential in this gray market. So after all, monitoring one's health is hardly a new activity, especially for older people who've always been expected to be on top of things like their blood pressure and things like that, weight, cholesterol levels, those sorts of things. One senior industry analyst suggests that it makes sense that the older demographics show interest. For one, they're much more engaged in their health due to general focus around chronic diseases, and they're in that risk group. Secondly, we know that older demographics have adopted mobile technology at a rate at which we had not expected, and most of these activity trackers use the smartphone or tablet as a hub device. So that's a senior industry analyst. Another analyst on a site reviewing products for seniors and their caregivers suggests that, again, I'm quoting here, when an elderly person uses a tracker, it does not only help in monitoring their fitness level, but it can help to predict possible changes in health, such as health decline associated with aging. So fitness trackers take on a bit of a unique position here in relation to aging populations. One that's focused on health rather than athletic performance in the way that they're pitched to younger people. And that's focused on producing data that's readily viewable on mobile devices to help responsible aging individuals mitigate risks for decline or identify onset of age-related decline. So as another industry observer remarked, using a Fitbit or a similar device makes monitoring one's health a part of a lifestyle. Now, the shaping of digital fitness tracking as integral to healthy aging lifestyles should make it of particular interest to social scientists. So my colleague Stephen Katz, who I believe was just here not too long ago, has written a really interesting analysis of this concept of lifestyle in contemporary gerontology. So on the one hand, mainstream professional gerontology tends to understand lifestyle as a collection of practices that you voluntarily adopt as an individual who is rationally seeking a successful aging outcome. And it's that understanding that underpins most of the professional literature on the role of digital fitness trackers in encouraging older adults to move more, to engage in more physical activity. And that's mostly in the behavioral sciences, in kinesiology and health promotion, that sort of thing. On the other hand, there's a more critical and sociological sense in which lifestyle represents, and I'm going to quote Stephen Katz on this, says a complicated series of spaces whereby individual agency and social structure come together in ways that define aging today. And that's the understanding of lifestyle that I want to go with here, because this understanding requires that we recognize the ways that social conditions and political priorities and the authority of various experts can join to shape our everyday embodied experience. So building on this perspective, I conceptualized self-tracking as both an individual and a social practice that's shaped on new pressures on aging individuals to manage and to optimize their bodily resources in such a way as to avoid dependency. Okay, so existing research on self-tracking has pretty much totally ignored aging. So a growing body of scholarship, though, in the social sciences has looked at self-tracking as a part of what Nick Fox calls personal health technologies, what Emma Rich and Andy Mia have called M-health technologies, Don Nathus refers to as biosensors, and Deborah Lupton calls digital health technologies. I want to look at, just for a minute, the latter two who have both produced monographs on self-tracking and quantification that argue that while self-tracking might appear to be something individuals do as a kind of individualist practice, it can really only be understood in relation to fundamentally social beliefs about how societies work or how they should work and what the responsibility of individuals in those societies is. So Deborah Lupton's book, The Quantified Self, came out in 2016, and she provides a pretty comprehensive sociological take on the quantified self, arguing that, and quoting here, that self-tracking may be theorized as a practice of selfhood that conforms to cultural expectations concerning self-awareness, reflection, and taking responsibility for managing, governing oneself, and improving one's life chances. Now, Lupton draws attention to the relationship between these practices of bodily management and dividing practices that are premised on, and again quoting her here, moral meanings associated with binary oppositions, such as thin, fat, healthy, ill, and normal, pathological. But missing from that list are oppositions of young, old, independent, dependent, and functional, dysfunctional. And Stephen Katz and I have argued in an earlier piece that, in fact, that division of normal and pathological has increasingly become replaced by division between functional and dysfunctional. And at a time when demographic shifts and shifting regimes of governmentality, the whole sense of the austerity society, are conjoining to really problematize aging bodies, it's not too surprising that appeals are being made to these technical kinds of measurements in how we, and algorithmic calculations of how we draw these dividing lines. So the other monograph that came out last year is Gina Neff and Don Nathus's book on self-tracking. Now, they write more from the perspective of science and technology studies, and they locate practices of self-tracking more firmly in relation to biomedicalization, which they argue, and quote, carves a groove in our collective imagination that makes close measurement of the body both conceivable and desirable. Now, it's not at all central to their analysis. In fact, age only gets really mentioned at one point in the book, but at least they acknowledge the silence about age and aging in this literature, particularly when they compare the way that producers of wearable tracking devices envision consumers other than those who are already young and fit. So they say, and I quote here, "We quickly find ourselves in a different market, the independent living market, where older people are treated as if they are only ever in need of surveillance, where other human needs like beauty or curiosity somehow just disappear. What is left on the table in the health line are people who do not fit the mold of the young body that can be optimized, or the mold of the docile body in need of extensive management by others." So we get this divide then in the existing research on self-tracking and wearable trackers. This division between wearable tracking technologies as either enabling agency and self-control, and this is exemplified by that younger fitness buff, the fitness tracker market, or technologies that enable others to monitor and manage an older person's activity, the independent living market. So this is this screenshot is for it's called Lively. It's looks like a fitness tracker, but it's something you would have your parents wear, and you would get this message telling you that, you know, mom spent 30 minutes in the kitchen today, which is, you know, 10 minutes more than yesterday. So you can monitor things like, you know, whether or not they're likely spending enough time preparing food or getting things to eat. So most of the existing research focuses on one of these. Most of the social science research is on self-tracking, focuses on younger users. This is in terms of the work on everyday practices of self-tracking. It doesn't focus on age, and in fact, most of the most cited studies don't even include anyone over 40 in their samples, so it's a very young demographic. Now, they provide some interesting insight into what's been called everyday analytics or lived informatics in terms of how people interact with devices. But they really miss, I think, the opportunity to locate self-tracking in this broader kind of biopolitical landscape where it's not just a set of individual challenges here, but there are age and aging as population issues as well. The other side of the divide is dominated by studies on ambient monitoring, wearable technologies that permit ambient monitoring, and the role that they might play in opportunities for aging in place. And the focus here has been on elders confronting physical challenges, dementia, or other factors that may jeopardize their ability to remain in their homes, and how ambient monitoring might help that. Now, these are important topics too, and I don't want to suggest that these aren't good research, but I think it tends to replicate this division between young, independent, fit, and old, dependent, frail. So the study that I want to talk about today is trying to get at or see what are the questions that aren't being asked in terms of that gap. How do older adults who engage in self-tracking understand its practices? How do they understand and use the data that it produces? So this is a very small pilot study based on 10 in-depth interviews with adults 55 or older, who the recruitment was adults 55 or older who currently use a digital fitness tracker. So I didn't supply them. It had to be someone who was already using one, or who had previously used one and abandoned one. I was interested in those people as well. All participants were asked about their history of use, the things that they track, the ways that they viewed the data, who they shared the data with, their thoughts on, how tracking their fitness related to their experiences of aging. It was most of the interviews were about 90 minutes in length. Some went to over 2 hours, but they were really, I can't tell you how much I enjoyed these interviews too. They were fascinating, and it's going to take me a long time to really do justice to the stories and to the very rich narratives that these people brought to the interviews. So they were 8 women, 2 men, average age of 64.2. Not surprisingly, most reported a history of activity, being active, considering themselves active, given the topic of the study. And in fact, 4 out of the 10 identified as runners. They were either former runners or still running, but walking was the activity that most of them tracked with their devices, even if they engaged in other activities like swimming or yoga, things like that. Now, very obviously, very small and unrepresentative sample in terms of generating conclusions, but there were some recurring themes in the interview data that I think raised some really interesting and important questions, and that we're going to use to guide further research here. So I want to talk about 4 themes. First, the temporal dimensions of self-tracking, the way they interpret the numbers, the connection to the sort of discourse of healthy aging, and the idea of connectedness and community that results from this. So the first theme is temporal practices of tracking. Now, wearable fitness trackers have been called everywhere technologies with a WDA on it there. So, I mean, they're designed to be worn continuously. They are always collecting, they're always transmitting data about the person wearing them. And everyone in my study who was currently had a fitness tracker reported that they wear them 24/7. They wear them all the time, removing them only for charging. Now, for some, these devices transformed already existing habits of tracking, either on paper or we had to say for some of the runners with a runner's watch, to a new platform. But even for those people, there was a distinct shift in temporality because it was a continual collecting of the data. So for example, runners who used to track their heart rate and keep track of their heart rate when they were running, or their time and their distance and those kinds of things on paper, would do that while they were running, and now they were doing it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's continual. The fact that the trackers also doubled as timepieces meant that they were always looking at them. And as Diane said, she says, I tend not to just look at the time. If I look at the time, I look at my steps. And different things that they were tracking took on different significance. So steps, which most people associate with Fitbits, right, is, how many steps, like this, kind of stepping. They were accumulated over a day, and that's how people really treated them. So steps were rarely viewed as anything but some kind of a daily measure. I did X number of steps today. And it was connected to that particular day. So Rhoda, my oldest participant at 79, was quite typical in reporting that she didn't, quote unquote, collect the numbers, but she noticed them. She said, mostly I just look at the numbers achieved during the day. About a little over half of the participants had devices that also tracked their heart rate, which many of the just garden variety trackers do now. And this measure was treated as disembedded from any particular day. It was something that was continuous. It was seen as a malleable measure that reflected overall health status. So Moira, for example, like the others, she treated her step count as interesting in the present, as this day, but her resting heart rate was the only thing that she kept track of over time. Heart rate for me means health, she said. You know, the lower your resting heart rate is, the better shape your heart is in. So my goal was to get a sense of where my heart rate was and to see whether or not I could lower it. And for others, that heart rate as an overall measure was a measure of age beyond the chronological age. So Robert, for example, described himself, because of his heart rate, as a 55-year-old in a 40-year-old's body. Nora, too, was adamant. She says, age doesn't apply, it's your fitness level. And you know, heart rate is an indicator of that. Now, let's talk about the steps for a minute. So as other researchers have noted, working on the kind of tracking data has to be interpreted, has to be made meaningful to users. And users bring with them varying levels of technological literacy, health literacy to this practice. They draw on a really broad range of lay discourses and expert discourses. And this was really related to the ways that the numbers produced and the measurements were related to motivation for activity, but also for confirmation of how people already felt about themselves as active. Now, the 10,000 step goal. This was so much fun to talk about because every single one of my participants took their fitness tracker out of the box and accepted this 10,000 step goal that it came set up, right? And none of them could say where it came from. So I kept hearing again and again, that's what they say you should get. But nobody knew who they was, right? No, maybe I always remember a Far Side cartoon from like 25 years ago, and it was, you know, somebody opening a door, and there was a guy sitting at a table with all these telephones on it, and he said, and she said, so you're the they, and that's what they say, you know, and that kept coming back to me when people kept saying, well, that's what they say you should get. I recently heard that it dates back to a Japanese marketing campaign of some sort, that it hit the papers just after I finished the interviews. So participants usually noted that they had read or heard that this goal was the one that's recommended. Moira was quite explicit in linking this rather diffuse sort of expertise to a desire to measure herself against some sort of norm. So she says, I had heard for sure that the goal for an active, regular, normal activity for somebody, anybody, was about 10,000 steps. So that was my goal. So I wanted to measure whether or not I was close to that. So users were encouraged to compare themselves to this, you know, ageless norm. For somebody, anybody. But I found it really interesting that, again, almost all of them said they hardly ever met it. And they weren't really worried about it when they didn't. So Diane says, you know, there aren't many days that I get it, but you have to let it go. You have to say, don't be crazy. Larry says, there's a lot of days that I don't get 10,000. I'll get 8,000, yeah, but it gives you a benchmark for where you should be. So this sense of numbers just providing this benchmark was reiterated again by others. Brenda says, I take the information with a grain of salt. It's just a sense of how you're doing in a day. Most also implicitly recognize, and this is something that Emmanuel Toole's written about, the idea that it's not just enough to be active, you also have to be not sedentary, right? That these are two different measures. So Haley says, I don't purposefully go out during a day to do 10,000 or even 7,000. But definitely, if I don't do, I'm going to say 2,000, I'm like, that's way too low. I've got to get moving. So there's these two measures. But that's something I'm going to elaborate on in another paper someday. So this is, you know, a sort of sense of what the dashboard looks like. You haven't seen one. So participants did enjoy the feedback, the positive feedback. You get little vibrations, you get little badges, you know, your devices provide you when you get the goal. So Diane says it's like a pigeon getting its pellet. And some did tell me that the numbers did motivate them to enact change in their routines. Again, Moira, very, very articulate woman. For me, I find it interesting. I like that it identifies parameters. I find the information useful because of what it calls on me to do differently. So explicitly linking it to a change in what she was doing. But then again, sometimes the numbers didn't tell them what they wanted to hear. So some were very candid about being a little bit dodgy around days or times when the numbers might be discouraging. So Nora faithfully entered everything that she ate or drank, as well as recording her, into her Fitbit app, which you can do on the mobile interface. But she said she avoided doing that on a couple of days or a weekend when I knew I'd just blow it. I'm not going to make myself feel bad. So she just wouldn't, do it those days. Larry had considered sharing his numbers on Facebook, but then he considered the possibility of negative feedback. And he said, if I got someone making a comment like, gee, Larry, you didn't do too much today, I'd be gone. I couldn't deal with the negative comments. I always like to get positive feedback. And one of the really interesting narratives is Lucy, whose daughter gave her the device as a gift. And her daughter lives out in Western Canada and was her Fitbit friend so that they could, they saw each other's data. And she would make up excuses for days when her activity was particularly low. So she'd say, oh, I had to take it off to charge it. Oh, or I forgot to put it on again after my shower. Because she was explicitly worried about how her daughter was going to interpret those kinds of numbers. So while some of the behaviorally oriented research in kinesiology tends to treat the data produced as kind of in a closed loop of feedback and behavior modification, I think these experiences suggest that feedback loop might not be as straightforward as it seems. And Larry's hesitation to go social and Lucy's attempts to mediate her daughter's potential reaction to low activity numbers also raise questions about connectivity and surveillance. And again, those are issues that I think deserve a lot more attention. And then there's this idea of getting credit. A phrase that came up again and again, wanting to get credit. So many participants wanted the numbers to confirm their self-understanding as active. And there was frustration when some things didn't add to their step total. Or when they forgot to wear their trackers. I mean, I heard time and again, I took the dog for a walk and I didn't have my damn tracker on, and it was like I wasted the whole walk. I didn't get credit for it. And I have felt that, having done that. Diane complained that if she went kayaking, it didn't give her credit. Nora complained that cycling didn't give her credit. And she said, I can enter it manually into my Fitbit, but it doesn't up my step total. I'd like to see it recorded because I'd like to get those 10,000 steps, even though I know I've done it. Haley raised another sense of not getting credit when she found that her wrist-worn tracker, like this one, did not accurately record walking with a shopping cart. So she says you go all around Costco. If you've ever been to Costco, you know how many steps you're probably getting in that trip. And you come out with basically the same number of steps you went in there with. Now, Haley's complaint has a lot of relevance in terms of how older people may interact with tracking numbers, because the AARP actually did a study on older adults' views on trackers and found that they were really inaccurate in recognizing steps in non-standard conditions. So people who may take shorter steps because of physical issues or use a walker, right? So and they weren't measuring that kind of thing. Now, the emphasis on getting credit, I think, really highlights this tension between there's this perceived authority of numbers, but then there's the individual's own embodied sense of self, and they're knowing that, yeah, I did take that walk even if it didn't measure. Both Brenda and Diane said they paid more attention to the numbers when they first got their trackers than they do currently. According to Diane, she says it puts you in tune to how active or inactive you are. I believe it just makes more of a connection. I mean, it's quantifiable. Initially, it did give me new information. Now I've established that baseline, it just is more confirming. But everybody said that they would continue to wear their trackers and indicated that they would replace them if lost or damaged. That's one of the questions I asked. I said, you know, if you lost it or if it broke, would you replace it? And they all said yes, they would. And many as well said that it was interesting, it was fun, it wasn't just about the numbers. So I think there's this affective dimension as well as that instrumental one. So enough about numbers. Well, regardless of their fitness history, all participants acknowledged that aging and age-related bodily changes had prompted their interest in self-tracking. And this isn't really surprising given the widespread promotion of fitness and physical activity as forms of body work that are, directed at keeping us young. Because old still, denotes this dependence, lack of agency. And participants really, really endorsed that message and also used self-tracking as a form of risk management in their own lives. So all believed that physical activity was part of the healthy aging lifestyle. Most, like Diane, also mentioned that it's not just your physical health that's at stake. So quite typically, raising about, I've heard the message loud and clear, I've always been active, but I think it's something I think about more now. Physical activity and cognitive, maintaining health. Here's they again, they associate physical activity with so much more than they did previously. So this expansive sense of benefit. Many talked about witnessing age-related decline in their parents or other relatives and hoped that embracing a particular kind of lifestyle would provide them with better outcomes. I could give you a lot of examples of this. Maybe I'll quote Moira again. She says, now the older I get, the more concerned I am for sure about family history of heart disease. So whatever it is I can do to sort of pay attention to that stuff, I'm going to do. Robert summarizes his medical history and says if you can do anything to avoid that wheelchair, then do it. Rhoda articulated quite well, I think, the sense of many of them that they're part of a generation that it pays attention to this, really the first generation to be deliberate about fitness in this way. Rhoda says she felt that this generation was the first where at age 55 or so you began reading articles about how for your own sake and for the healthcare expense sake you should really take up lifelong fitness. So with her reference of healthcare expense there, she's tapping into that theme of responsible citizenship as well. But despite all of this, 100% acceptance of the healthy aging message, they also realized that there are things that you can't control. There are always going to be constraints and surprises. So they mentioned a number of factors: physical, social, relational, that can impede even the best intentions towards an active lifestyle. They were aware that fitness trackers are too costly for some. Several noted that the activities they enjoy require memberships to gyms or fitness centers. As Rhoda put it, great for retired teachers with pensions. Many mentioned Canada's harsh winters as curtailing free outdoor activity for a good part of the year. But Haley mentioned physical limitations related to hip surgery. But I want to focus on Cherry here, because she was so interesting. She articulated a very complex set of issues. She said about every 10 years, there are surprises. Well, I've got this pain here, my husband's ill, I can't get out today. It's not just yourself that's affected, it's your family members, your grandchildren you have to pick up from school, these sorts of things. She was very committed to walking every day, but she found this particularly disruptive when she was caring for her husband during his terminal illness. So she says, I knew in my mind that I should be out there. The more you're out there, the better it is, but you just don't have that time. You're at the hospital, you're waiting for the doctors, they changed the appointment. There are so many other things. But I think this summarized so well the vicissitudes of the life course that can put paid to the most committed of self-trackers plans for this, successful aging lifestyle. So the last theme that was suggested by the interviews describes the way that self-tracking was related to broader questions of connectedness, community, and responsible citizenship. And some researchers have suggested that's what's really unique about digital tracking is its social capacity, the ability to sync data to applications and to websites, to share with friends over social networking, and manufacturers like Fitbit certainly promote this through the formation of user communities, both through sharing your data with your Fitbit friends, but also these online websites. This is Fantastically Fit Seniors, I think we've got a list of about 2,000 user groups that are aimed at older adults on the Fitbit site right now. Zero interest among the participants in this study, none. Only one. Brenda said she browsed them when she first got her Fitbit, but remarked that it just didn't appeal. And I found it kind of interesting that none of my participants were particularly interested in sharing their data with friends or family members either. For those that did, it was one person, 2 people. So Moira had one friend that she thought had been important at first to motivate her, thinking that maybe if I hadn't had that one friend, I might have been one of those people who puts it in a drawer, because she'd gotten it as a gift. A lot of people get these as gifts from children and partners and things. Lucy, the one who was friends with her daughter who lives at West, said she really enjoyed the ongoing connection that it provided. She said, it's nice just, seeing her there. She says, but even though she joked about it, she was quite anxious about how any decline in her activity levels might be perceived by her daughter. She would, joke about, she'll think I'm ready for the home, these kinds of remarks. So their sharing veered a little bit too close to surveillance for her. A lack of interest in social networking around self-tracking, though, did not mean that they treated their activity as strictly individualized. Social connections were very important in terms of their ideas of what constituted a healthy and active aging lifestyle, and surprisingly, even the seemingly individualized activity of self-tracking proved connective. So Rhoda, for example, said her Fitbit was a great conversation starter. Moira said she often used it as an icebreaker when encountering acquaintances who she noticed were also wearing one, and saying, hey, how many steps did you get today, kind of thing. So while participants kind of confirmed the findings of some earlier research that it's the sociality of activity that's important for older people, they integrated rather than rejected the use of technology in that. So broadening the idea of connectedness to the idea of citizenship, all participants wholeheartedly endorsed that message that continued physical activity was important, but this is the only question where they radically differed in their opinion into what role digital tracking could play and their views on what the public responsibility is. So at the one end of the spectrum is Robert. Now, you have to understand, Robert was one of those people who was an overweight couch potato at 50 and a marathon runner at 55. And he had this kind of evangelical zeal about, he went on and on about, how he felt this could really save people. At the other end was Rhoda, who said, she says, you don't want to have a new absolutism that somehow you're morally inferior because you're not working out. But then she went on to say that if you're community-minded, you want to cost your community as little as possible in healthcare costs. So they generally thought, you could promote the greater good by encouraging this, by using fitness trackers to encourage it, but they all recognize it might not be for everybody. There might be a lot of reasons why you might not want to use one. So obviously, it's impossible to draw, any firm conclusions from such a small and exploratory study. But I think the insights of these older self-trackers both confirm and challenge some of the assumptions of existing research. So certainly technologies like wearable fitness trackers and their associated apps multiply the number of things that can be measured, increase the frequency with which they're measured, and produce data that's both at your fingertips and can be digitally archived and can be shared. The fact that it comes out of the box with preset recommendations like 10,000 steps invites users to compare themselves to this, supposedly authoritative standard. And the design and use of fitness trackers has been described as a biopedagogy, teaching users how to be responsible, healthy citizens. None of those imperatives were uncritically taken up by the participants in this study, who draw on their own embodied experience, their own embodied knowledge, to resist what Aristia Fotopoulos and Kate O'Riordan call the biopower of data. At the same time, they show a keen awareness of themselves as aging and as part of a generation for whom, it's really doxa that physical activity, staying active is how you age successfully. They're interested in measurement, they're interested in quantification as ways to gain knowledge about themselves, to influence decisions that they might make, but also as confirming how they already experience their embodiment. And they envision their aging futures as simultaneously constrained by their family history, as open to active reshaping, and as subject to uncontrollable events. Deborah Lupton, in her book on self-tracking, distinguishes between that which is private and voluntary and self-initiated, and what she calls pushed tracking, which she defines as encouragement for people to monitor themselves from other agencies. And I think the designation of an entire demographic as risky if they fail to monitor and manage their activity, which we see, that's the message that's going out, is a pretty good example of how fine that line is that distinguishes those types of tracking, and of the danger that certain populations are going to be stigmatized and increasingly required to demonstrate that they're discharging their ethical responsibility to move. So already we're seeing talk of insurance companies giving rate breaks to those who agree to prove their activity levels by uploading their data. So as Emmanuel Toole has argued, digital devices provide a proverbial kick up the backside to the already extensive manner in which everyday life of the aged body is colonized, known, and monitored by measurement. So I think the ethical imperative for aging bodies to demonstrate constant motion is likely going to become stronger, and I think the market is going to measure and motivate is going to expand. And I'm pleased to say that I received notification on Friday that SSHRC has funded the larger research project that this was a very small pilot of. So along with my collaborator Stephen Katz and Isabel Peterson, who's a CRC at U8 in Wearable Technology, and Wendy Martin in Brunel University in the UK, these are some of the questions that we're going to be exploring in that research project. So I can't thank my participants enough, the 10 people that gave me their time and told me so much. I feel like 5 years is probably not going to be enough to explore the questions that they raised for me. All right, so I'd like to thank the folks at the ACT project. It's a SSHRC-funded network on aging communications and technologies that funded the pilot research. Obviously, my collaborator, Stephen Katz, who we've been doing this stuff together for a while now, and he's so much fun to work with, and if you saw him when he was here, you'll know that. And Trent Center for Aging in Society that provides me with great sustenance, and thank you for inviting me.